the third Writers Lab mini conference, and thank you all for coming. I'm Jenny Brown, Director of the Center for Children's Literature here at Bank Street College of Education, and we encourage those of you who would like to tweet the day's events to please use our hashtag, which is hashtag CCLMiniCon3, and that's just all letters, CCLMINICON3 numeral. The username is student, all lowercase, and the password is Bank Street, one word, all lowercase. Lucy Sprague Mitchell established the Writers Lab a little more than 75 years ago for the teachers at the Harriet Johnson Nursery School, which was part of the Bureau of Educational Experiments, originally housed on Bank Street in New York's Greenwich Village, and affectionately dubbed simply Bank Street. Now we're at 112th Street, but we are still affectionately dubbed Bank Street. If any of you have seen the current exhibit at the New York Public Library, The ABC of It, Why Children's Books Matter, curated by Leonard Marcus, you know that in 1937 there were no books for toddlers and children attending nursery school. The Writers Lab met on Wednesday afternoons in a workshop atmosphere so teachers could gather, share their observations, and write books for their students. Today, Writers Lab members still write for early childhood, and they also write for newly independent readers, right through young adults. Could I ask both current and emeritus members of the Writers Lab in the audience to please stand and be recognized? I'd like to thank everyone at Bank Street who helped make this event possible, especially Kristen Frieda, our Director of Library Services, Lindsay Wyckoff, our archivist, and Allie Bruce, our children's librarian, and also Daniel DeFries, our videographer. And of course, our thanks to all our volunteers, our moderator and project leader, and the esteemed authors and artists presenting today. We truly appreciate your time and contributions. Just a few housekeeping details. The men and women's restrooms are both located just off the lobby here at the street level, near the tables staffed by the Bank Street Bookstore, which has books by all of the authors and artists presenting today. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Richard Lewis. Richard Lewis founded the Touchstone Center in 1969. Through his work there, Richard has been teaching and collaborating with children in the New York public schools for 45 years on the writing of poetry and the importance of imagination. He has edited and written a number of books highlighting the poetic and mythic traditions from diverse cultures, among them Miracles, Poems by Children of the English-Speaking World, All of You is Singing, a retelling of an Aztec myth, and The Way of Silence, Prose and Poetry of Basho. His most recent book is Play, Said the Earth to Air. Some of you may have had the opportunity to hear Richard speak during a series of panels we held last fall, moderated by Leonard S. Marcus, about his exhibition, The ABC of It. Richard was the first person that Leonard Marcus ever interviewed, and I'd like to read one exchange between them from that interview, which was published in winter 1980 to 1981 issue of The Lion and the Unicorn. Leonard asked, "Did you have a teacher or someone else who influenced you in your choice of work?" Richard replied that he did have one teacher in high school, to whom he dedicated a book that he edited of Greek lyric poetry, called Muse of the Round Sky. Richard said that this teacher was, quote, "the only teacher I had who was tolerant of my inability to concentrate in class. He also read poetry magnificently out of a deep and mellow voice, and I remember being tremendously taken by his presence in the classroom and by his enthusiasm for poetry. I remember that on a test he gave at the end of the year, which was basically an essay, I felt absolutely incompetent at answering the questions, and so I wrote poems instead." His comment when he gave the test back was simply that he appreciated the fact that I was trying to deal with the questions in a poetic manner, but that I mustn't ever forget that to be imaginative, one also needs facts, and there is a balance between the factual and the imaginative. It has always stuck with me as a wonderful bit of wisdom. Please help me welcome Richard Lewis.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to do something here because I feel a little unequal with you. You notice that I have the sun here, and you don't have any. I think the speakers have the sun, right? Am I correct? All right. So we have to do something, everybody, in order to kind of get our equality back here. Would you mind just taking your hands just for a minute, and would you make a little bit of a sun, just like that, and would you very, very gently bring it up into the air, a little bit like that. Thank you very much. And then would you open it up beautifully, beautifully, beautifully. Thank you so much. And bring it down and put it on your lap somewhere, so you too can have the sun today. Thank you. Jenny, thank you for reminding me of what I said how many years ago about facts and the imagination. It's an interesting thought to gather today in the world in which we are living, in which one is tested upon the facts that we know, probably, and I suspect we all agree, probably to a point where the fact is almost irrelevant because it's something that seems that it has only to do with the test score that you get. And not that we didn't have that back in the 80s or 70s or 60s or 50s, but I do want to just mention that one of the things that, thank heavens, we haven't started doing yet is testing the imagination. The imagination, it seems to me, is still one of those areas of human development that, because we perhaps know only a little bit about it, we don't really know that much about it yet. And I think one of the things that's so fascinating about the imagination per se is that it changes with every child. No two children have the same imagination. No two human beings have the same imagination. And the roots of the imagination, where it comes from, where it grows, where it sustains itself, I think is different in every human being. So as long as we can keep this phenomena that we're going through, in which testing has become so much of the child's existence, and the possibility of the child also being imaginative, that if we can somehow keep them at times separate so that the testing phenomena doesn't overcome literally the extraordinary way in which the imagination grows in every human being. So, that said, all of you have your sun, and those of you who got up early this morning noticed that it was actually sunny out, even though it had, am I correct about this? It had rained last night? Yes. So I did bring in just a picture of my daughter made once of the sun. So those of you who just want to remember what the sun looks like, there it is right here. And what I'd like to do a little bit in the short amount of time that we have here, or I have, is just kind of go backwards a little bit in terms of children and reading. And one of the things that I've been very interested in terms of childhood is how children read the world themselves. We read to them, but they also are reading the world itself. And they're looking at the world as a language, as something that in some ways is there to be deciphered, to be spoken about, to be thought about, to be imagined, and so on. And a lot of the work that I've done over the years is really listening to children, listening to exactly where it is that they're coming from and why they think the way they think, why they imagine the way they imagine, and so on. And I must admit that I'm totally still living with an amazing question mark about the nature of childhood itself. It seems to me that, in fact, childhood is itself a language. And it's a language which we as adults sometimes have difficulty in deciphering and understanding totally, because not only is it constantly changing, but it's very, very complex, and it's filled with surprises. And so in the process of listening to children, one of the things, again, that has fascinated me is this attempt of the child to understand the world, sometimes not only with spoken language, but with movement, with gesture, with drawings, with music, and so on. That the expression of childhood finds itself in many different venues, in many different ways. So I'd like to just share with you, from the standpoint of the child, some of the questions that they bring up, not consciously, but unconsciously sometimes, about the nature of the imagination, the nature of questions, the nature of curiosity, which I know we're going to be speaking about today, and the nature of play itself. I'm quite convinced, over the years again, that there really is no division between play and imagination and wonder, that those three elements are intricately connected. And it's only our, perhaps, adult way of separating, defining things, that we've made separations along the way. But for the child who doesn't even perhaps know the word wonder, or doesn't know the word imagination, doesn't even know the meaning of the definition of play, that all of these things are integral because of the nature of childhood itself. So, with that said again, let me kind of take us a bit on a journey of childhood, but through the perspective, through the eyes of children themselves. Before I begin, though, I want to go back to two adults who woke up one day, I suspect, as we woke up today, and those of you who had a moment of stepping outside realize, my heavens, it's spring. And the fact that it's spring, because we've had this horrendous winter, it kind of suddenly really kind of pulls into your own mind this feeling, oh my gosh, it's true, you know, that there is this rejuvenating, renewing aspect of nature itself. And if you kind of go back into your own sensibility about what renewing is about, you realize that as a child, that childhood itself seems to be on the very edge of newness. That it in itself is constantly trying to unravel what newness is. And because of that, this perhaps sounds a little bit romantic, but I would almost say that there are qualities of childhood that are in itself kind of eternally spring-like, that they're constantly in the process of growing, constantly in the process of seeding a new thought, a new idea, a new way of looking at the world. So I'm going to begin not with a child in this case, but with two adults, both poets, who in a very simple way have explained spring, but yet have not explained spring. Basho, who you mentioned, wonderful Japanese haiku poet, said this: "Ah, it is spring. Great spring, it is now. Great, great spring. Ah, great." And that's it. But then Antonio Machado, wonderful 20th century Spanish poet, said it in a slightly different way, but leaving us a little bit further on the edge. He said, "Spring has come. No one knows how." So both of those seem to me to balance this wonderful exuberance of childhood, but then pulling back the other aspect of childhood, which is the question. Where does everything come from, and why? That sense of the unknown, the sense of the mystery, the sense of the magic of the world, it seems to me, are both equally kind of balanced by both those poets. So, leaping into a child, here's 10-year-old Michael, who's said it this way: "When spring comes, I feel like a daisy just opening up into a new life. I feel like running 20 miles and taking off my heavy coat and putting on a pair of sneakers. I feel like I started a new life and everything is better than it was before. I get faster in running and I can go swimming outdoors. It feels like the smell of new flowers and the animals coming up from their holes, the birds coming back from their vacations. I love spring. So that's a 10-year-old's wonderful, wonderful, kind of vigorous way of greeting this amazing season. It's also a kind of wonderful way in which the child kind of encompasses all the different aspects of its particular concerns. And I think children have that ability. You know, they kind of see the world, again going back to the reading of the world, they kind of read the world in terms of themselves. And that self is filled with thus the minutiae of what is important to that child, as was apparent in this poem. But then we go back to this other quality of the child, the quality of the child that is just kind of tiptoeing along the edges, not knowing exactly where the world begins or where it ends, not knowing where spring begins or ends, but somehow it's just beginning to feel the possibility of how do I put into meaning, into words in this case, something that is a little bit elusive. So my 5-year-old daughter, Sarah, who, by the way, one of her teachers is in the audience, which I'm thrilled. When Sarah was 5, she said this to me one day. She said, "The sun brightens out in one more today." That was at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I get up very early, and Sarah got up very early, and we sometimes would sit, and she would just kind of tickle my arm a little bit, and that was one of her statements. And again, an amazing thought. It's very fragile, but it also is this sense of the emergence of something and the emergence of something into something else. That there's a connective tissue to the world. That one thing brings another thing. And that in itself is, if you think of it, we think of it, is an extraordinary, extraordinary discovery. So Jenny, age 9, echoes that in a slightly different way. She says, "As my happiness grows, the sunlight grows also." Very simple, but very, very profound. This connection between me, the nature of me, and the nature of what's outside. That we're not disconnected. And one of the tragedies, I think of, I can put it this way, the tragedy of growing up, perhaps, is the separation between often the nature that's outside and the nature of ourselves. So the child still has that kind of biological link to the world where there's not a separation necessarily between itself and the world out there, the nature that is the world. So this 5-year-old also said it again in this wonderful dual marriage between myself and the world. And she said, "I hop, the shadow hops too. I lie and think about the sun, and my shadow thinks about me." And it's true. Do I have anybody disagreeing with us? Shadows do think about us, don't they? And sometimes when I'm working with children, you know, and we look at various objects of the world, and for instance, my glasses that are sitting here, you know, and I happen to pick them up, and I suddenly change the conversation a little bit, and I say to the children, you know, I wonder what these glasses felt as I picked it up like that. And I changed the conversation totally from the reality, supposed reality of the world, to the imagined reality of the world. The fact that children can make that quick leap from this object to the life of the object, and that the life of the object is as real as the object itself. Now, this to me is a phenomenon of childhood. And I think it's a biological part of the child, and a profound part in which Children literally see the life of things in everything. It's not simply a material aspect of the world, but a living thing. So, again, going along that line of thought, the sense of myself and the nature of the world out there. This 8-year-old who said, early one morning when the birds were singing, I had another heart in me. I've sometimes had the feeling when we read these images or read these thoughts of children, that one of the things we have to be very careful about is we don't dismiss the thought too quickly. The idea that I see something out there and something happens and my heart begins to respond is, again, an extraordinary insight into this complexity of ourselves and what exists out there. That I'm part of it and it's part of me. And that the child doesn't make the definition part of the world the important part. What the child does is make the sense of the world as being a holistic, a kind of complete unity. So, moving on, as I mentioned, the unknown for the child is perhaps one of the great questions, not only for the child, but for ourselves. What does exist and why? The great why, the sense that we really don't know the answer. And even though we go to school and we're given the answer, the question which still haunts us is the whyness after the why. You know from your own experience, certainly with children, or if you've had your own, or you're working in classrooms, you will give an answer and then the child will say why. You'll give another answer and the child will say why. And we'll continue the why until literally like a piece of spaghetti, the why continues forever and ever and ever. And then some child somewhere will say, well, what's the why of the why? What's the why of the why? And we are kind of stumped, but we're not stumped. We continue this wonderful unraveling of our own expression of what we mean by meaning, what we mean by why, what we mean by the whole existence of existence itself. And the child is right there with us, constantly asking those questions. So, here's something about the do, which Amy was 10 years old, and she was playing with this whyness of things. It's called the do. Quietly and softly it came, and no one saw it when it came. It just passed through. And then quietly and softly, it brought the dew. No one felt it. No one saw it. So no one knew why it came. A portrait of Amy for a minute. She was a bustling, energetic child who never stopped talking. She was a child who, if you observed her from the external standpoint of things, you think, oh, she's not thinking at all. But then she wrote this. So this is the marvel of childhood, is that what appears on the surface is not often what is inside. And often, how many hundreds of children, certainly I've encountered, who give you the impression of an outward, difficult child, but inwardly they're thinking, they're kind of dreaming and working through this complexity of what we mean by being alive. So, there's yet another part of the child, it seems to me, this journey of the child as it goes through this day, is this sense of its discovery of its own inwardness, its own self-inwardness, the sense that I myself have an inside. And that inside is the me, the imagining me, the playing me, the wondering me, that sometimes the world doesn't see, but it's there. So, there are two pieces that I'd like to share here. One is by Philip, who's 9. And it's very simple, but it goes again to this wonderful moment in which something has happened and it brings it back to something else. He said, "When I touch the flower, I feel the blossom shaping. When I touch the flower, I feel the blossom shaping." All right, again, a child as I remember him, who was a real 9-year-old, full of vim and vigor and would not sit still, but there in that slight but very significant moment, he touched something which was so extraordinarily powerful. I feel something inside something. So here's a Japanese child, again 10 years old, who went even a step further. She said, "As I watched a lily, it became a cave. Outside it was white, inside it was shining. As I went into the cave, there was a door. As I opened the door, there was a water pool. Water of the camellia tastes good. What is the taste of the lily's water?" So we can say that one of the aspects of the imagination is to go inwardly, to move in directions that both literally can go on an outward level, but it can also go inside. It can go inside the objects it sees, go inside the objects of the person who is seeing and feeling and imagining. It's this tool that enables the human mind literally to expand into whole areas of thought that literally we didn't even imagine existed. Sometimes when I'm in a classroom and I have to bend down to this, I'm not disappearing, by the way. I often carry with me my knapsack because inside is something inside, right? And when I open my knapsack, the children always wonder, as I'm continually talking to them, why is he doing this? What is inside, right? And as I approach the inside and put my hand in there, they wonder, what is he reaching for, right? What is he reaching for? And sometimes he kind of has to fumble around to find what he is reaching for, because, like the imagination, it doesn't always hit the mark just when you think it does, but there, sure enough, there is something inside. Oh my gosh, or in contemporary times, OMG. And Richard has this wonderful thing here, this beautiful, what would you call this? Container, right? A beautiful container, and I can open it up so gently like that, and inside is something, but of course you don't know what's inside, and I don't necessarily remember what's inside, but I can put my hand inside, right? And I can pull something out just as simple as this, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, look what's here, and I bring this wonderful feather out like this, and I can begin talking to children. Talking about curiosity for a second, I can talk about children, about the bird that lived with this feather, right? Now, watch what happened. The bird's not there, the feather's there. But the imagination, the power of the imagination to encompass the whole image of what the bird is, just by the feather itself. Now, we might take this act of imagining as a simple act of imagining, but it's more than that. It's a biological means of survival. It's how we know the world, that we can enlarge something even though we have the simplest of objects, right? The simplest of things can bring the largest of imagery. So this tool, and by the way, I hope you realize that I spoke of it as a biological truth, is part of the biology of the human being. It is not a fiction. It is not something as an add-on to the human mind. It is not something that you do on your leisure hours. It is something that is happening all the time in every human being, in every child. Now, part of the tragedy, seems to me, of education is that it is put aside on the left-hand corner or the right-hand corner. All right, if we have time, we will do some imagining. If we have time, we will do some dreaming. If we have time, we will do something that will make art or whatever. It's the other way around. This is where it begins, and it never ends. And this is where the curiosity begins, is on the simplest of objects, the simplest of thoughts, the world begins to open up. So I'm going to put this back in my little container here, and of course whenever I do that with children, I kind of need their help because I'm not sure if it's going to go to sleep on me or not, right? So if you don't mind, I will put this very gently, like this over here, like that. I'm going to put it in front of me. And you see it doesn't want to stay. Look at, you see that? It moved. So that means the container, if it moved, it might have a reason for moving, right? I don't know the reason, but the children usually do, right? And the fact that they do, they know that then their conversation of the world is being taken seriously. So what we as adults have to do is we have to listen to their conversation constantly and realize that they might be, and I'm just suggesting this now, they might be many years ahead of us. Many years ahead of us. I'm convinced more and more that as a teacher, we don't so much teach, but we listen. And we evoke. And we try in whatever way we can to bring to the outward world this inward world in which the child recognizes the conversation that it is having with the world itself. So instead of slipping down into deep sleep, I think I will put this down near this machine over here, and we'll see what happens. By the way, sometimes when it gets close to these machines, it starts to read the machine on its own, and it too begins to daydream as we daydream in front of those machines. So I will very gently put this down so that I will not disappear, my voice will not disappear, and I will continue our journey. So, observation. How children observe the world. Yes, how they observe it. It's not, again, often the way we observe the world. It's not often having anything to do with exactness, but more with the experiential, more with the sense of the explosion of the world upon them. So, Warren, 8 years old, said this about the grass. The grass seems to dance, it seems to walk, it seems to talk, it seems to like to have you walk on it and play with it too. And it seems to be stronger than you and I. It all seems, doesn't it? There's the key word. It seems like. It seems as if. It seems like the world is something to do with me and the grass. I'm not separate from the two. Or Danny, 8 years old, who said, once there was a magic flower. He lived out in the cold. He lived in the dark and cold. So he spun and spun until the world grew very hot. The whole world grew hot. Then out came the magic flower. It was spun out just as I'm telling you. So, magic, this quality of magic. It seems to me that curiosity is really about magic. It's really about what it is that makes things happen, but we really don't know the ultimate reason why they happen. Even though they can be explained in the most wonderful detail, still the why question continues. So, in a sense, our minds are very rich in possibilities, and the possibilities all exist because the imagination creates those possibilities. Here's a 7-year-old, Marilyn, speaking about a cricket. Nothing is better than the song the cricket sings. The sound of the cricket brightens my feelings and makes me sing too. My mind is the cricket's mind, and I wish I was a cricket. Hop, hop, the black cricket. The cricket pokes out his feelers, and I can hold them, and the song of the cricket is my mind. There it is. The proof of the pudding, right? The song of the cricket is my mind. How many of us, if we really are truthful, can remember a moment in time when everything around us, particularly that world of nature that's just looming around us all the time, we suddenly felt a oneness with it. We felt that the mind of that thing called nature and our minds are simply together. We're one and the same. That's the biological aspect of the imagination. That's where the imagination makes that leap, that profound leap between itself, myself, and the self, if you want to call it, that other aspect of the world out there. A 6-year-old once said, "Oh, wow, air opens. Air can open." Oh my heavens. Can you imagine you're saying that again at your age? That air can open? Did you know that it could open? How many of you, let me just see the hands of all you who remember that moment where air could open, right? But it's a fascinating, truly fascinating sense of the world. That not only can the air open, but it's like the child's mind is opening. There again is a kind of that parallel polyphony between the world out here and the world inside. So, Ashraf, speaking about play. The light likes to play with me. The light is going around the world, and the other lights are dancing. I like those lights so much. I love the dancing and the going around the world. So, I can tell you quite simply that he wrote that. I remember him writing it when he was looking through a telescope that we had made, and he was examining all the light in the room like that. And in a split second, the entire world of light became a danceable world, and he was dancing with that world. But he was, watch this, sitting down. He was not moving. But what was moving, obviously, what was this interior world, this universe that was alive with light and air and the sense of its own playfulness. So, two philosophical thoughts that children have come up with, and there are many, of course, and I've just chosen two for the morning here. Amir said about playing. He said, when playing, the mind is focusing on what it's doing. When playing, the mind is focusing on what it's doing. Now, this runs totally against many frustrated parents and teachers. Right? And it's been my interest and experience that I've noticed more and more that when children are playing, they perhaps are paying more attention than they are sometimes when they're supposed to be paying attention. And when they're not paying attention, they usually are paying attention to something else. And I suspect it's the mind at play, that their own mind is playing, and that the imagining, playing, wondering mind never, never stops. It is always active. So then the question for us is, how do we reach around that and get into the playing mind, the wondering mind, the imagining mind, even though the surface of the child often says the opposite. So Jennifer, 11 years old, said this about imagination. She said, imagination is thinking beyond what is seen. Imagination is thinking beyond what is seen. Okay, there it is in a nutshell, right? We see with our eyes, but with the imagination we see beyond what we see with our eyes. And that the imagination for the child, in fact, is a form of sight that profoundly perhaps sees a lot more than we give the child credit for. So Michael can say this about a leaf. He said, leaf is life with a touch of wind. Leaf is life with a touch of wind. You must remember that these thoughts were written with the simplest of objects. This was a leaf that I may have brought to the class, right, and just showed it, and we thought about it, and then Michael can write something as simply but profound as that. He sees the whole picture, and then he connects it to something else, the wind itself, which is also, by the way, wonderfully invisible, and can do all kinds of wonderful things in terms of our imagination, because in a sense it becomes the invisible part of the wind becomes our sense of the invisible of ourselves. So this particular child, Jose, said this about the wind. And by the way, a lot of these children that I'm quoting are from New York City. And supposedly they're absent from the natural world. It's at their fingertips. It's all there. It doesn't take much. It's right. Well, I sort of answered my own question here, which is if we're nature, that's nature. So even my fingertips could be the tips of the wind, right? Even where I move my hand and the air moves, look at the air. That's all of the fundamental, elemental aspects of the world right there at our fingertips. So Jose said this: the wind is pushing the sky through you. One sky is like being in it, so this sky is a nice sky to the family that is in my heart. I imagine that it always will be there. When you spin around and spin around, it looks like you're flying with the sky. When it rains, it's a smooth wind by you. The wind loves its body. This child, by the way, was from the Lower East Side, where there weren't too many trees on the street, and things were blowing, yes, and there were things around, but look at the profound connection this child made to his body, the wind's body, the sense that the universe is not just outside or inside, it's a kind of a culmination of both. So, finally, we're coming towards night. And this 7-year-old said, I know how daytime changes to nighttime. Daytime melts. It's true, isn't it, right? It is true. But it took a child, simple statement like this, a child to suddenly discover that idea. Yes, it's the change of things, and it's the melting. I remember seeing ice cream doing, perhaps, or ice melting, but the light melts as well. Marvelous. And this child, a 7-year-old, who said, it's marvelous. It's magical. With my paintbrush, I unfold the sky. I unfold the earth. I make the sun shine. I make the river flow. So the magic is not only inside, but it's the doing of the magic. It's the imagining of the magic. It's the artist of the child who has the urge to make what it sees come alive. And with that quality of its hands, of its voice, of its way it moves, the way it sings, the world comes alive. And that too is its own form of magic. Alex, 6 years old, speaks about it even more specifically. He said, art is magic. Suddenly you say you think, I want to do something. What is the best thing to do? Art. Will it do this? Will it do that? And that's art. So there again, we're back to the question, right? The power of the inner question that we bring to the world, the curiosity we bring to the world, the sense that we live eternally with the question, and that the child is the originator of the question. So, a few more thoughts. This was written by Kweshon, who's 8 years old. And after our thinking about trees together, looking at trees, he looked out the window and this is what he said. I think the trees have a conversation of nature. I think the trees have a conversation of nature. I think what's implied in his remark is this, is that the child is the beginning of the conversation. We are part of the conversation, and that everything around the child and ourselves is part of the conversation. And that the conversation is the speaking between objects, speaking between ourselves, the speaking of thoughts, the speaking of questions. And it is an eternal conversation which never, never stops. And for a child to understand that, to see that we are living within a conversation of nature, seems to me to be extraordinarily profound. So I'd like to end. And again, sometimes what I do is I start a class working with children. I just bring in nothing but my favorite little pebble like this. And in the years that I've worked with children, I began first with a pebble. I decided that I wanted to start an organization in New York that would have nothing but a pebble as its resource. No money, no space, but the space of the pebble, right? And to my wonderful surprise, this pebble opened up the universe. It doesn't cost anything. You can find it anywhere. But for a child to hold the pebble, right, and to suddenly realize that inside the pebble is not only the inside the pebble, but the inside of me. And that, again, conversation, that link is so profound. So let me just finish by reading one piece of wonderful thinking by John, who was 10 years old, and we had worked with our pebble, and this is what he said. This dream is about a wave, but not an ordinary wave. A very special wave, and I'll tell you why it's special. Because there's no other wave in the world like that, because it came out of my head. This ocean scene was given to me by my pebble, from his imagination to my imagination. Now, what I mean by a super imagination is that I can go so deep into my imagination that I can take from it the most strangest but beautifulest creature in the world. For example, a fish. A dull, ordinary fish can be turned into something rare and exotic. Now it is a colorful amazement of life, which is more than I can say for other things, and which concludes this brief talk about the wonderful things an imagination can tell about. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I have to get sleeping. Thank you. Okay.
You helped even this person figure out how to make some cuts. I was thinking as we were doing this that this is why I say everyone should have to wait tables, because you realize what goes into waiting on a table and making a great dining experience. Same with the pop-up book. Now I will never look at Matt Reinhardt the same way again. It's really amazing. Okay, it is now my pleasure to welcome Stephen Savage to the stage, who seems to ooze creativity from every pore. Stephen is known for his extraordinary linoleum print illustrations, which speak to children through geometric shapes and blocks of bold color. He is the illustrator of Polar Bear Night, which was named a New York Times Best Illustrated Children's Book of the Year, and a notable book by the American Library Association. He is the creator of Where's Walrus, also named an ALA notable book, as well as a Best Book of 2011 by Publishers Weekly, The Wall Street Journal, and The Horn Book. And Stephen is also the illustrator of The Fathers Are Coming Home by Margaret Wise Brown, whom we celebrate here at Bank Street. That's the book Stephen presented at BookFest at Bank Street in honor of Margaret Wise Brown's 100th birthday. His editorial illustration has appeared in dozens of major newspapers and magazines, including the New York Times, the Atlantic Monthly, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Stephen has been an adjunct illustration instructor at Manhattan School of Visual Arts for more than 10 years. And you're also teaching at FIT now, right? Advising FIT as well. Please help me welcome Stephen Savage.
Wow, thank you, everybody. Well, I'm finding all the imagination and creativity this morning very, very inspiring. And gosh, what time is it roughly? Does anybody know?
11:30.
What's that?
11:30.
11:30. So it's almost probably time to eat lunchtime, right?
Yes.
Okay. Or maybe if you got up early, it's maybe time for a little siesta. Or since we're here in Bank Street and we have a book on the screen, it's time to read. Read. So what is this? What am I doing? I'm talking with my hands. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm talking with my hands. We're all New Yorkers. I'm talking in pictures, and that's what I want to talk to everybody about today. And Where's Walrus was a book that I did a few years ago. Oh, look, here we have a New Yorker here. What is she saying with her hands? What does she want? That's right. So I am the creator of 7 books, and 6 of those 7 books are traditional children's books in that the words and text work in tandem. So they're sort of the harmony and the melody of the song. So one of them, Where's Walrus, is pictures only. So I know everybody likes the term wordless. I'm not crazy about the term wordless. It sort of reminds me of fat-free a little bit. It sounds like a dietary restriction. But we'll have to probably I'll be using the word wordless throughout the talk. So here's the book. So how do you read a book that doesn't have words? How does that work? Should we try it?
Yes.
Will you guys help me read Where's Walrus? Who's read Where's Walrus before? Have you read it to a group before?
I made them read it to me.
Oh, wow. Well, the fun of a book that doesn't have text is every time you read it, it's different. So the way we read it in about 10 seconds here is going to be different than the way you would read it to 2 or 3 preschoolers. So, and then you always, the advantage with, well, you have a title to read, so you've got 2 words, so you can, that's your jumping off point for the reading. So let's see, let's have, this is what I do when I go into a pre-K class. Let's have the girls read the word where's, and we'll have the men, that means Yancey and Richard, reading Walrus. It's going to sound like this. This is what happens when you go to Bank Street. It's going to sound like this. Where's Walrus? So you guys got to make up. We're outnumbered here. Okay? You ready, Richard? Okay. So, yeah, we'll go to the sports bar after this. We'll grab a beer. Okay? All right? So, ladies.
Where's?
Boys.
Walrus!
Okay, we gotta get together, guys. The women are together on this one. We're not together. Okay, ladies.
Where's?
Walrus!
Perfect. Let's hear it for the guys. See, this isn't a problem when I go to PS 39 because the class is evenly split between the sexes. So here we have the beginning of our story already being told in the end papers. And in a book that doesn't have any words, you know, a book with words would say, once upon a time there was a walrus who lived in a, where does he live? We have to figure that out. He lives in the city. Where else?
City Zoo.
And then can everybody wink? Are there, see, I can't wink. That's why I had to have a winking walrus. Can you wink, everybody? One eye closed, the other one has to stay open. And then we are here in the zoo. So in 3 pages, we know what this story is about. We know the who, the what, and we know what's going to happen next. So the economy has got to be there. We have to be able to explain. We have to shoot this story out of a cannon. So in 3 pictures, we know that what's going to happen next is the walrus. He's a good Samaritan, so he's actually going to close the gate so that all the other napping animals will not leave, right? No, he's going to close the gate because he's concerned. He's like me. I mean, I have a dog and a 5-year-old at home, so I'm constantly closing the gate and making sure that no one escapes. So that he's like me, no?
No.
What's he going to do?
Escape.
Oh, there he goes. Okay. And And then you all know the story of Where's Walrus. He starts hiding. He starts hiding. And then there he is on the right side, right? He's there on the right, spitting the water, right? And then here's the mermaid on the side. And when we go into this class, we like to joke about, oh, maybe that's the walrus there on the right, on the left. Okay, so let's figure out where's Walrus. Let's see, is he there on the end?
No.
Is that him?
No.
Is that him?
No.
Is that him?
No.
What about, is that him?
Yes.
That's him. There we go. Here we are. So Roxy was talking about gamification. We have a little game here. We have a hide and seek game. But I think the fun of Where's Walrus is that we're driving the story forward with that game. So a story it's in device of a story and makes you want to turn the page and find out what happens next. So I'm going to do a little informal poll right here. So here we have him doing all these different things and trying on. Were you guys like me? Did you try on a bunch of different hats when you first came to New York? Did different jobs? So I came here 25 years ago this spring. So I worked in publishing for a while. That's where I first met Jenny. I think every New Yorker is like Walrus in that he tries on different hats. So let's see. Let's go back to this informal poll here. Who would rather be let me hear applause for mannequin. Mannequin? Anybody mannequins in the audience? No? Bricklayer? Any bricklayers? How about, oh, we got a few bricklayers. Okay. Firefighter? The firefighter. Everybody wants to be the firefighter. Here, what about can dancer? I knew it. I knew that Bank Street was a group full of can dancers. Okay. Or how about this? Do we have people who wear this hat? This is the hat for me. I think we've got a lot of beret wearers here. Okay. So he's been on the run, and something's changed though. He's up there on the, he's probably gonna get back down, right, and head to the department store now. He's gonna, I think he feels something. He's on the edge of that board. I think we need to all feel like that edge of the board. You ready? Can we all stand up a little bit? Just stand for a second. Just a little stand, yeah. Ready? We're all creaky. Okay. Can we put our hands out? Can we assume the Greg Louganis pose at the edge? Now, this is the part, where's my phone? I gotta take a picture of this. I gotta get the security code in here and take a picture because Twitter needs to see this. So, okay. Now, you're not paying attention to me taking a picture. You're in your pose and your eyes are closed. Can everybody close their eyes? You know, you actually could dive off of these stairs. I'm a little concerned. Okay. Let's keep our hands out. Close your eyes. Can we all slowly raise up on the tips of our toes? Everybody get on the tips of their toes. Can we imagine? Now, Richard's about to do a triple twist. He's ready. Okay. So what we're going to do is you're going to imagine yourself doing the triple twist, half pike, and then when you sit back down, you're going to make a splashing sound because you're jumping into the pool. So are we ready? 1, 2, 3, and splash. There we are. And the hat is off. Is that a good dive, everybody? I had a preschooler once say he got a 50. So when you get a 50, you get what? When you do a great dive at the Summer Olympics, what are you presented with?
Oh, gold medal.
Gold medal. Can we hear it for the walrus and his gold medal? And once you win the gold medal, what happens next? What do? Do you go to Disney World? That's what they say.
Endorsements.
What do you think happens to Walrus? What does he do?
Eats.
He eats? Where does he go after this? After his
City Hall.
He goes to City Hall. He goes back to the zoo. And what's different about the zoo now? He's an attraction. His pool is bigger. But what's the really important thing?
He does return.
What's that?
The diving board.
The high dive. Everyone's focused on the real estate here.
He has lots of fans.
He's like me right now. I am the walrus. I have all of these fans watching me as I stand up in front of everybody, and the zoo is populated. The zoo is a fun place to be. So that is the story of Where's Walrus? And I want to share with you a little bit about my thoughts on what it's like to tell a story. I was going to, yeah, silent movies are the original wordless books. So I was going to talk briefly about some of the visual grammar that went into actually Where's Walrus? And I was thinking about what Richard was talking about earlier. It's strange to create a book like Where's Walrus and then have to, as an adult, go back and talk about it and to put it into all these adult terms and to use words like grammar. Grammar was not a word that was on my brain when I was creating Where's Walrus. So the mode that I was in was I was completely playing. I was making pop-ups and not making messes and not knowing where this was going to go. And the book actually, we spent many years, my editor David Saylor and I, and many times the airplane as it was flying over the water dipped down and almost crashed into the water, and then it would miraculously head back up. And the process of getting the grammar right was just trial and error and being engaged and having fun. So here we have the close-up. So I have 4 grammar points here. I have this Herbert Motter poster. And close-ups direct our attention to the main character. So what do we know about Walrus from his close-up?
He's got a secret.
He's got a secret, or he's a little rascally. He's got something going on in his mind, and that's what the close-up does. So color and contrast are a way of attracting attention, and also just creating an emotion. And so we all love the color red. Red is a color associated with strong passions. So we've got, first of all, we've got a stop sign which tells you stop right now. We've got love. We've got the color of blood. We've got, this really gets my attention right here. Jenny Brown. We've got the color red. So of those emotions, what do we associate with Jenny? Passion, love, violence, adventure. Those are all attached to the color red. And they attract our attention to big moments in the book. So all of the referees have red colored jerseys. So the next element is a diagonal, which is something which is always used in art to create excitement and create movement. So in a book about a chase, it's great to have your diagonal. And a big part of Where's Walrus is, and it's funny to talk about this in relation to children's books because people cringe a little bit, but I'm going to use a terrible word, branding. I'm going to use design and branding. And when I was a kid, I loved all of these logos. These are logos that I was attached to as a kid when I saw them. And they meant something to me. Bless you. And I had a mentor, Stephen Heller, who is a design historian, who said that great design is something that touches the heart as well as the mind. So I think when you're looking at a logo, for example, the 76 logo, I mean, I remember when it was 1976 and being 11 years old and seeing it by the side of the road. And when I see that logo again, it takes me back to that time. So do you guys have any favorites here? Does anyone have a connection to any of these logos? We're dating ourselves here because a lot of them aren't around anymore.
The apple.
Lego. And don't you miss Pan Am? Do you remember when the Pan Am logo? Yeah, yeah. And now it's almost used as, there are TV shows and movies where the Pan Am logo really takes us back to the Mad Men era. And Wonder, you gotta love Wonder, and you almost feel like you need one of those spongy sandwiches when you see that logo. So the cover of Where's Walrus is essentially a logo, and it was our hope, and I think that it worked, that it created a connection with viewers, and connection with very young viewers in a way that a logo does. A logo does something, it communicates to people who can't read. There's a pre-reading aspect to logos. So these were all the variations that we trying to get that McDonald's, red yellow combination getting just right. And part of it is just pleasing design, is getting colors to work in combination, in pleasing combinations, which again is just trial and error. So this is my daughter and my wife, and about 6 months ago we stopped into a Dunkin' Donuts, and we had one of these logo moments, which really taught me the power of branding and logos for young children. And Chloe said, "See that coffee cup, Papa? That means Dunkin' Donuts." So what she was saying was that she knew that just based on the coffee cup that was Dunkin' Donuts. The picture of the coffee cup was language for her. So, and the Dunkin' Donuts people are very smart. They understand this. And the McDonald's people are smart too. And so we'll be driving down the highway and she'll see the Golden Arches. And she knows that we don't go visit the Golden Arches. She knows that it's out there. So, so there's reading going on in these images. And who, okay, we're dating ourselves again. Does anyone remember Susan?
Mm-hmm.
Which one doesn't belong?
Can we sing it? I heard someone, we started to.
It's not like the other.
One of these things doesn't belong. One more time. One of the, oh, keep going.
It's not like the others by the time I finish my song.
Wow. So, to answer the question, it's the two, right? No. Okay. So, and this is, when I'm talking about the grammar of Where's Walrus, this is the most important point of grammar in Where's Walrus, which is the idea of pattern, which is that game aspect that engages young kids and engages the viewer and drives everything forward. And when the pattern is broken, surprise is created. And there's nothing, and I'm not doing anything unusual in using pattern. It's done in poetry, it's done visually, it's done textually. It's what kids love. I mean, if we had more time, we'd play Simon Says, all of us together right now. And I know that we would have fun. So, do you want to sing again for us? Here, I'll do it. I'm going to click this when we go. Go ahead. You want to sing again?
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you guess which thing is not like the others by the time I finish my song?
Very, very nice. So, the thing that doesn't belong is our hero. Everybody is sleeping, but the big guy. So, and that's the most important part, and I think that was the fun for me in creating the book, was breaking that pattern. Oh, here's another fun pattern. Look at this. Here's an awkward family photo. And part of the game is that everybody's dressed up, but that also everybody's doing the same thing. So there's a pantomime aspect, there's a Simon Says aspect, and then there is a camouflage aspect to Where's Walrus. So they are doing both things. They are looking like each other, and then they are posing in the same way, in a very weird pose. So what is the power of this kind of visual storytelling? There's nothing out of the box about Where's Walrus. We've been living with wordless storytelling in the form of Charlie Chaplin movies and Buster Keaton and the old Mickey Mouse shorts. And Where's Walrus, I felt like all we needed to do was tap into what kids have at birth, which is that they have this innate visual language. You don't need to learn the ABCs of a visual. It's something that we're born with. It appeals to our reptilian brain. Our animal brain, which tracks objects and keeps us out of danger and reminds us we recognize faces and we know who mommy is and we know who daddy is. And it's a very, very powerful thing in that we are hardwired for it. In going back to what Richard was talking about, the sort of the biology of, there's a biological aspect to this kind of storytelling. So a child picks up Where's Walrus. This, believe me, this was not a posed shot. This was a shot I took off of the blog. So, and I was thinking, this was about 6 months after the book came out, and I thought, gosh darn, the book, it works. I didn't think it was going to work. It's actually working. Like like a child knows how to read this book. And one of the beauties of visual storytelling is that it's multi-generational and it's multicultural. So in Indonesia, and again, I was looking at this photo with my wife last night, and she said, you couldn't ask for a better publicity shot. Everyone is having fun. It doesn't look, the composition of the pose, and these kids are enjoying the book. So, and just to close, this was an editorial illustration I did for just a few weeks ago. It's tax season, so I have to remind everybody to pay your taxes on Monday or Tuesday or whenever it is. But you get a story. As an illustrator, my job is to touch places in the brain that words can't touch. Where's Walrus tells a story that you couldn't tell with words. And so when I'm given a story about taxes, I'm thinking, oh gosh, what do I do? How do I make this fun? How do I be witty about this? How do I concept this in a way that addresses the idea of taxes, but that may make us laugh and give us a reaction? So it's using metaphor, and I've been thinking about it all this morning. It's really about creating poetry. So I'm actually thinking differently about my own work after being here at Bank Street this morning, thinking about, well, that's what a poet does. A poet tries to say something in a way that you didn't think of, in a very simple way. So you can talk about things like taxes and global warming and a slumping economy. And I think that's why these publications hire me, is how can I, to go with the theme of this morning, is how can I play a little bit with something that just isn't playful. So we've covered the worst editorial subjects in the last 5 slides. Taxes, banking, slumping economy. Oh, God. How do you talk about God? So this is the New York Times Book Review. So how do you make the search for God something is not as so godly? And then the proof is in the pudding, when you get a nice little card from somebody. I know, thank you, Chris. So I would just like to ask, oh, and then there's part 2. Where's Walrus? Stay tuned. Yay! And we had to use the grammar that I spoke about. We're using all of the same rules again. But how do we, the challenge is how do you do it and up the stakes and create a different story that just doesn't feel like a sequel? We all know about sequels that feel like warmed over versions of the first book. But we wanted to keep to the same rules. So no words, it's fat-free. And let me just ask, all of you, can somebody give me, can we do just 30 seconds or a minute of visual storytelling? Can someone, because we're New Yorkers, we talk with our hands. Can you guys, because I'm probably after this, I'm probably going to have to run back to Brooklyn, and I know that before I do that I have to sign some books out in the lobby, and then probably get a bite to eat. What else? Does anyone have any favorite things that they do with their hands? Do you remember the moment when you first came to New York when someone showed you at the end of the meal the way? So visual communication is you're talking to someone who you can't hear you. What's a favorite? What's some sign language? Ooh, nice. Very good.
My 15-month-old always goes when she wants to know where something went.
Yeah.
So it's just, as in, there you go.
Well, think about that. Well, think about the incredible moment when your child, I remember this with my daughter Chloe, when they learn to point, and you're thinking, she's talking, and they're not talking at that point, so she's talking. Yeah.
That's the one that gets us all the time.
Yeah, that's great. Any other ones?
So we do things when we agree.
You do that? When you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you can, if you want a drink of water but you don't want to interrupt the teacher, you go like this.
Oh, that's nice.
If you want to use the bathroom, you do this.
So this is sign language that's very specific to Bank Street, not used on the street.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Any other ones? Oh, nice. Thank you. Thumbs up back to you. And I will close with, I want to thank Jenny so much. And Jenny, call me. Thanks, everybody.
I want to thank all of our presenters today and all of our volunteers and all of you for coming. This was just a wonderful day. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did.